Packers fans out here to stay. Cheeseheads green and gold all day. Jordan Love lead us to the bay. Every game we find a way. Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for all, let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for all, you know. Green and gold gonna glow. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown.
Alright, now that we're all in a good mood, aloha and welcome back to another episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. Today, we continue our pre-draft positional episodes with Sarah Kelleher as we recap running backs, her once-a-year episode with us on Ohana Packers Edition. Sarah, welcome back again. It's always a pleasure having you on, and we're really glad that you're joining us to go over running backs today.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's tradition. You know, when Joe sends me this DM every year, I'm like, yeah, well, I'm in. Let's just figure out when we're going to do it. And, as we talk about every year that I jump on and talk draft, this is literally the only draft thing that I do. I even sit out on pack a day, and I do not discuss the draft there. So it's fun, and then at least people I work with or, if you're at a wedding or whatever and you're talking to people and it's like, hey, what do you think for the draft? This gives me an excuse. I'm like, well, I don't really know, but I can tell you all about the running backs because I did my research and watched film and looked things up there. So always appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. And we do got to figure out how to make this more than just a once-a-year thing as well. I know we say that every time, but maybe this year will be the year we finally figure that out.
Sarah's being so polite. This isn't a Sarah thing at all. This is a Joe and Mike issue. But we no need to beat a dead horse there. Joe, okay.
It's very much my own issue because we get into the middle of the season. It's like, do we want to ask somebody onto our wonky-ass hours of recording or, do we just roll with it? Because, like, this last year we had a guy that we had on during the off-season that wanted to come on and talk the Broncos with us, and I remembered it at the beginning of the season, but then the closer we got to the game, the more it just kept getting pushed out of my mind, and then 3 days beforehand, he goes, are we doing this or what?
We did not. Sorry, Mike.
But no, odd recording times, never have to worry about that with us. I mean, we record pack a day every week. Like, we start recording 10 p.m. Eastern time. Just, Dusty and Steve have kids. They have to take care of the kids, put the kids to bed, all of that. So I will say I liked it a lot more when I was in college, and I was, I'm like, it doesn't matter. I don't have class until 10 o'clock, or I don't even have class tomorrow. Now, having to get up and work, I'm like, man, I really need to make sure, like, as soon as it's done, I'm like, all right, see you guys, going to bed. Like, everything is set out already for the next day. But obviously wouldn't trade it for the world, and it works out perfect. If I had stuff after work or need to do anything, I don't have to rush. But yeah, don't ever worry about that as a barrier because I'm used to it, for sure.
Right on. Well, before this episode, it was really a quiet week for the Packers, honestly. We left off with the flurry of free agency moves that the Packers were able to do, and I don't think anything happened this past week. Either of you, please correct me, but I believe that they're kind of just sitting tight, waiting out the rest of the time between now and the draft. Maybe they'll make one more peripheral move, but it doesn't seem like the Packers expect to make any sort of pre-draft move. I think the only one that maybe might come across the table is they bring back Trevon Diggs at this point. That would be like the only one I can see happening, just saying like, hey, that situation seemed to work out decently for both of us. I know we didn't make it as far in the playoffs as either of us hoped, but, the door is still open, and if there really are no further offers for you, the door, we're still more than welcome to having you back. Otherwise, the only other outside chance I can see is like another defensive tackle, but I think like a DJ Reader or something like that. But I feel like Goot is going to let the pre-draft process or the draft process play out and maybe backfill depending on what he does at that position in the draft. But otherwise, it seems like it's just typical Packers steady as she goes at this point. No more real surprises. So, Sarah, I'm going to warm the seat for you this way. So usually we're going to stick to our usual setup where we do state of the Packers position group, any sort of pre-draft thoughts, and then where we expect him to go in the draft. So, I mean, the room is pretty set. My only question to both of you, but obviously we'll let Sarah lead off. I know this is a 2026 draft looking episode, but looking ahead one more offseason, who is more likely to be on the Packers opening day roster in 2027? Josh Jacobs or Marshawn Lloyd? Go!
Ooh. That's a good question. I'm gonna go with Marshawn Lloyd, and that's just because I think it's gonna be expensive to keep Josh Jacobs, and I would love for it to work out. I also have, which we'll talk about in a second when we talk about the state of the position for the Packers, but I'm actually banned on Pack-A-Day podcast from saying the words Marshawn Lloyd, so this is a little refreshing for me.
I think I remember that from yours and Dusty and Steve's episode.
Yep, because every time I get excited about him and I talk about him on Pack-A-Day, like literally the next day, it's like, oh, he pulled his hamstring in practice, or oh, this like crazy injury that could seemingly only happen to Marshawn Lloyd has happened to him. So I'm just not allowed to say it. Like, we actually had Matt Schneidman on our show last week from The Athletic, and he asked me a question about Marshawn Lloyd, and I was like, I can't answer that. Like, I'm not allowed to answer it for the sake of the Packers. I can't. So I'm hoping that my silence will lead to the opposite result, and that he'll have a great year and will be on the team next year. They can obviously get him for a lot cheaper. But I just think it's going to be difficult for them to keep Josh Jacobs at the price he's probably going to ask for, given what his age is going to be. I'd love to see it work out, but it's kind of, giving me a little bit of memories of Aaron Jones and how it's like, wow, this seems like a great guy, great for the locker room, a clear leader on the team. But that position is one that the Packers really haven't been willing to pay, sometimes what that highest market price is. So we'll see. But that's a good one. I definitely will have to look into the future on that.
Joe, your thoughts?
I think I'm going to go the other way because the way the big thing is a lot of people are talking now. This is I'm also trying to factor in that, of course, Tucker's going to get an extension, and there's going to be some other guys that get extensions, whether Christian Watson does or not. Picking up the fifth-year option of LVN, which I think they got to make a decision on that here pretty quick. But the way things are set right now, I believe they have a ton of cap space next year. Now, granted, they could get even more by, cutting ties with other players, but unless they decide that they're going to draft a running back high, they like another one coming out in free agency next year, the room's kind of bare. I mean, yeah, you have Jacobs, Lloyd, if you get rid of Jacobs right now, you're looking at Lloyd and Chris Brooks, unless again, they draft somebody in this year's draft. Then you have the potential. Okay, well, friend of show Jake Shavink really seems to think Damian Martinez could be a sleeper. Maybe they thought of him a little bit more because, with them letting Emmanuel Wilson walk, maybe they do think more of Damian Martinez. Pierre Strong I think he's just a camp body at this point because he's setting just a year younger than Josh Jacobs, even though he's probably going to be cheaper. The Packers tend to like to get a little bit younger. So, given his injury history, it's hard for. I'm one of those. You can call me the doubting Thomas. You got to show me that you're going to be able to do it before I'm going to say, yeah, I'm here. I'm a ride or die with you. So, given that he's played 1.5 quarters in the last 2 years.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
I'm not really getting my hopes up. Now, maybe they could, they did send him out to, was it USC, in hopes that he can get his body right, figured out kind of like they did with Christian Watson and the University of Wisconsin. But I don't know. I would tend to think that, again, like Sarah said, it's going to be dependent on what Josh Jacobs does this year. He's going to be another year older. He's going to have a lot more wear and tear on the body. Is he going to hold up with anything? But I will believe more in a 29-year-old Josh Jacobs than a Marshawn Lloyd who, like I said, maybe a quarter and a half worth of playing time in the last 2 years. So that's kind of where I'm sitting at with it.
Yeah, it's always fun to have these conversations and such, but yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this season plays out because, so Jacobs at this point, he's under contract for 27 at like a 16 million cap hit. They could save like 13 on the cap if they were to release him. I'm sure the ideal is that he has a relatively healthy 2026, and then they, come to the table and talk about some kind of like 2-year extension or whatever. But it's always hard to extend guys like Jacobs who are like, I don't want to say purely, but they're so dependent on being like whatever burst they have and being a power back and stuff. And it's like, you just don't want to see his legs start to go because that's when, those careers kind of go down the gutter and stuff. But, and as Sarah said, Lloyd is going to be very inexpensive because the only way rookie contract guys see those accelerators hit is by playing time and production. And as Joe said, Lloyd doesn't have any of those because he hasn't played much in the regular season. So, yeah, it'll be really interesting. Honestly, I completely forgot Damian Martinez was on the roster as a future signing. I forgot he got added to the roster late in December last season. He was a guy I really liked when he was at Oregon State. But yeah, it'll just be fascinating. We're coming off 2 of the last 3 years. Jacobs missed a few games a season kind of thing. It'll be really interesting to see if they can, kind of, I don't want to say limit his snaps, but, not have to lean on him like they did for the obvious reasons in 2024. And then for 25, it was more the whole, LaFleur,
Uh-oh.
understand how your team is built. No, that wasn't the internet. That was my brain that spazzed out. So, oh, maybe it is the internet.
No, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is what happened last week with Murtig too, a little bit. So, yeah, we'll just have to see how it pans out. But so all that to say, as the depth chart stands right now, the 3 returning guys who were on the regular season roster or expected to have made the regular season roster in 2025 are Josh Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd, Chris Brooks, who just got a nice, honestly well-deserved 2-year extension. He has proved himself to be just a pivotal point of the Packers' passing attack. He also showed that he could work in some of Dusty's pony package units. And obviously, he came at the price tag he had because he's not some kind of real offensive weapon, but his value really is in terms of what he does as a blocker. And if he shows any sort of offensive, on-ball production, that's just extra gravy for the team and really would expand what LaFleur can call on the field. But it's obviously a big year for Marshawn Lloyd. And like you said, Joe, of the practice squad / future contracts guys, Martinez is the only one I look at for having any sort of, true NFL upside. And before I let you two have where you think the state of the Packers running back room is, I'll just say it for all of us. The mantra is that you can find running backs anywhere in the draft, but for the love of the sports gods, when will that be true for the Packers? Because I feel like in all of our adult fandom, it's like that speaks true for every other team, and then with the Packers, it's kind of like why not us? Like we dumb lucked into Ryan Grant, we dumb lucked into the best of what James Starks could give the team, and then it was like you had to spend a premium pick on Eddie Lacy, and then you had to go and get. I guess Jones is like the only one out of the last like 15 to 20 years where it's like, oh yeah, that guy was like running a round 5 pick, and he really panned out for the Packers. But it's like all these other day 3 picks since like Dorsey Levin's on, it's kind of been like those have just really not worked for the Packers. So I turn it over to you two now at long-winded thoughts aside. How do you two feel about where the Packers stand going into this draft?
I'll let Sarah take it because I pretty much said it when with your other question, because like I said, it's kind of the cupboards are a little bare at the moment.
Yeah, I think the state of the 2026 Packers in the running back room is honestly kind of similar to how I'm viewing the draft class for this year, in that it's extremely top heavy and there's your premier guys, and then after that it's like, ooh, there isn't a lot. Last year's class, when we talked about it, it had a lot of depth. There was guys where you're like, okay, this guy's probably gonna fall for whatever reason, or there's this thing that's maybe people are gonna be a little picky about, that one team will probably get them at a later pick, correct it, and then they'll be a really good player. And that's kind of how the Packers are right now too. I mean, we've already said it, but you have your guy, a premier running back in Josh Jacobs, and when he's healthy, is a game changer for the Packers. I mean, we saw the difference it made when the second half of the year he was playing pretty banged up, and that it does have an impact on the offense. So you have Josh Jacobs, and then after that, I mean, I think we're all going to miss Emmanuel Wilson more than we probably think. I was pretty sad to see that. I mean, I'm happy for him. Obviously, he's with the Seahawks, Super Bowl champs, and they have a great organization there. So good for him. He got paid, gets to go to a good organization. But it's just, you can't take that for granted when you're a fan and you follow a team, of having someone who can go in there, who has enough burst to do that. I think Chris Brooks is a good player, like Mike said, and that I'm glad that he'll stick around. But so you have him, who's definitely in the backup role, and then you have Marshawn Lloyd, who is just a huge question mark, and it's simply because there's no tape. There's a quarter and a half, or whatever it is, and the injuries are a problem. I mean, I know some of the ones at the beginning of his career, like I think he had appendicitis or something. Like, yeah, obviously no one's gonna hold that against you. That could happen to any of us sitting here right now, and there's no rhyme or reason, but it's a problem. And we have to hope that this is the year that whatever work that he went out to the West Coast and they were able to do on body pays off, and that he can stay healthy, because I think the ceiling is really high, but it's just, is he ever going to get there? Is he even going to be able to start climbing the ladder to help him get there? I think if anyone that goes on a podcast or show or radio show or whatever and says that they have the answers and they can see the future, like, they're lying. It's just, we don't know what's going to happen with Marshawn Lloyd. I think we've all have hopes and dreams that it's going to work out, and that, oh my gosh, the possibilities of what it could be if you have Josh Jacobs and then you have Marshawn Lloyd, who's this just brute strong, like, I don't even know all the adjectives to describe, like, how just athletic in that sense that he is, but we just don't know. And I think that's the hardest thing, and I think they probably will need to look at in the draft, and I know we'll get into it, of just what makes sense. Like, we need the reinforcements, because what they have right now, if Josh Jacobs is hurt, if Josh Jacobs, gosh forbid, tears his ACL, it's kind of shaky after that. It's shaky and then questionable. So that's not really what I think the Packers want going into the season.
Yeah, in particular, based on how... Oh, go for it.
The only thing about Emmanuel Wilson, and Mike and I were pretty happy with how Wilson was playing and what he was able to do, and we had hoped, at least on my end, I think I can talk for Mike a little bit on that we had hoped that he had come back, but then I got to look, and he is 27, So that goes into the thinking too, well, can we keep him around to be a number 2 with us, or do we want to try to get somebody in here, like Damian Martinez, I keep bringing his name up, is only 22. So, do we want to go younger with it since we do have the older guy and Jacobs? We do need that guy that maybe doesn't have the wear and tear, that has the tread left on the tires to step in if Jacobs does suffer another, ticky-tack injury or whatever. So that's the only thing I got to say about Wilson. But yeah, I mean, other than that, it's gearing up to look like that they're wanting to dip into late rounds UDFA types again to supplement what they have with Josh Jacobs. And Mike was kind of talking about the past drafts haven't seemed to work out for the Packers. And that's the truth. I mean, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams were the last two that you could really say that the Packers drafted with mid-round picks that, were able to produce anything. And look at what they had to do for that draft. They had to take 3 of them in that draft just to, hope that something hit. And unfortunately, they don't have the draft capital in this draft at this moment. Not saying they can't trade down for stuff and maybe other trades are in the works or whatever, but as of right now, they don't have the draft capital where they can say, well, we're going to spend 3 picks on a running back, 3 picks on a cornerback, 3 picks on a defensive tackle, and then our team's fixed. So it's going to be interesting to see what the draft looks like. And just before we jump into any of the draft, I was kind of looking at what could be, if there's anything in free agency that they could take a dip at. And right now, if you look at him, the youngest guy out there currently is Tyler Goodson at 25 years old. And I mean, this is just a basic list. I'm sure there's a bunch of, like guys that are sitting on UFL rosters or CFL rosters or something that they could call that are a little bit younger. But yeah, when your current free agent options, sitting there, and the youngest one is Tyler Goodson, and the Packers tried that, and they seem to not want to keep him around for whatever reason it is. You've got to look towards the draft and what's sitting there for them.
Yeah, and just to kind of go back to what Sarah was saying, like in terms of believing in Lloyd, it is the like epitome of his career that he gets. The last year's injury is the result of he comes back from hamstring and other soft tissue woes in the preseason, goes into that Colts preseason games, makes a play that none of the other running backs, maybe some of our receivers on this roster can't make on a wheel route. And I remember watching it. That was so cool. And the split second later, oh God, did he just hurt himself again? Because, and like Sarah said, it was one of those injuries where I know a lot of people want to make the jokes about it and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, I'm sorry, like the injury he suffered on that play, all of us would have, forget hurting our hamstring, we might have torn the muscle off of our bones because of how he got tackled from behind kind of awkwardly on that play and went down. And it goes into the, yes, he needs to be healthy, but there's the element of, it's just terrible luck for him too kind of thing, where he's like bridging the gap between Christian Watson's early career injury woes in terms of like the hamstring is always shredding itself. And then there's like, you said with the appendicitis, it's kind of like Luke Musgrave where it's like, oh, like his spleen just ruptured, and then he had the ankle, like Musgrave had the ankle injury his second season where it's like, oh, that looked like a normal ankle injury, and then LaFleur post-game is like, oh, he's gone for like 2 months kind of thing, and we're all like, oh, what? So, yeah, they've just got to get it figured out. You really hope they do, because he gives this team a dimension that they just absolutely do not have. And before we get into naming prospects, I just wanted to kind of put that on the table of, what kind of running back prospect are you looking for out of this class? Like if not necessarily asking to name names or anything right now, Sarah, but like, are you looking for someone in the Lloyd mold, or looking for more of like a true bell cow back to like assume the mantle, be in position to assume the mantle for Jacobs going into 2027, just so that is a potential option on the table for the team?
I think it's the latter. I think if you're Goody and you're thinking about the team and what we just talked about of who's the running backs in 2027, you have to kind of be thinking that way. Like who's going to back up Josh Jacobs if we're not able to make this work in the future? If he, again, if unfortunately something happens and he's injured for most of this season, like can we mold a guy who can potentially be that? So I think that they'd go with that. I also think that that's more of the traditional style and type of running back that the Packers have gone for previously. In current years, it has been, more of the A.J. Dillon, Marshawn Lloyd type build. And so that hasn't necessarily worked out for them the best. So maybe they're like, let's go back to what has worked, and that, has been the Josh Jacobs of the world. And so I just think that they're going to be thinking ahead on that one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, what I was kind of looking for was, well, obviously, what I looked at was all the types of running backs you could look at, just because, with the Packers, it always seems like when you think you get something figured out, they change up on you. So, yep. with first it was like cornerbacks. We thought we had it figured out with cornerbacks. They had to be at least 5'11" and at least this, and then they drafted Jair. And then, it was just looking most recently, it was wide receivers. They had to be at least 6'2", 200 pounds, and then they took Matthew Golden, who's 5'11", 200, soaking wet. So what I looked at was trying to find a good mix of everything, but what I hope they get is something they haven't had for a while, and that's a true home run hitter. Yeah, so where did you guys catch me at last?
No, it was
This is
literally
really
like
weird. I think
it
it's
was
Sarah.
literally like 2
It's
seconds
always
we
when
lost
Sarah's on here.
You said you want a home run hitter, and then right after that,
Yeah.
cut out.
Okay, so somebody that's got really good long speed, and that, obviously he's got to fit a mold. There were rumors that they were trying to go after trade for Achan from Miami, and what is he? He's Mike, you might know it a little bit better. He's like 5'5", 180.
That might be being kind to him.
Okay, so, but I mean, just a really small, but what is he? He's a fast, shifty,
Yeah.
once you get him out in the open type guy the Packers really haven't had. So, but then on the other hand, what have been the last two picks that the Packers have used on running back? Marshawn Lloyd, who otherwise being like 5'8", 220 pounds, so he's a bigger back. A.J. Dillon, 5'10", 220, 230. It varies with them, so I kind of looked at everything. But like I said, my hope is they can find that guy that can make his way through the trash, has the speed and the quickness to get out into the open, and basically, if he gets free, there's a chance he's going to score no matter what.
Yeah, I prescribe to the just draft all the Aaron Jones looking running backs you can get and just have like 4 of them, because that was the thing. I always thought that 19 it let LaFleur learn some like of the wrong lessons, that like, I can totally just pump as 250 to 300 carries into Aaron Jones, and it's like, no, we shouldn't be expecting that out of him. But it's like, that is the type of back he needs, is someone with good to very good vision, and like you said, Joe, the ability to take a run long. And Jacobs does so many things really well, but what's hamstrung the offense the past couple years is that he's so good at so many things, but he works so hard to break 10-yard runs, kind of thing. And as if LaFleur is going to continue to bang his head against the wall and want to be so run heavy, you've got to create explosives in the run game. And it worked in 2024 because Jacobs had like multiple 40-yard runs, multiple 20-yard runs. But last year, those all dried up for the Packers, and it really just put a cap on, it allowed teams to play us like 2012, where they're like, well, if your coach is going to just say, nah, we're not going to throw it 30-something times a game, and you're going to run it 20 times, and we don't have to worry about you gaining more than like 4 yards a pop, it's like, okay, we'll just live in that world, and you guys can just sort of eat up the clock and keep the game close for us. So it'll be really interesting to see how Green Bay zigs off of that. Like Joe said, every time we think that we've learned or discovered a little bit of the Coca-Cola formula that the Packers are, it's like, nah, just kidding, we're changing it up on you again. We're adding if it was Dr. Pepper, it's not 23 amazing flavors, it's 24 and a half. And so, it remains to be seen, but all that lead up aside, Sarah, it's pick 52. I know that everyone's saying the Packers need a corner or a defensive tackle, maybe an old lineman at 52, but the draft board has gone to absolute, it's gone absolute cheeks, and running back is the only position. Who is that running back that you're like, I know the board sucks, but Packers fans should be really excited to get this guy at 52?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot is going to have to happen because it is so top heavy. Like we talked about, a guy I'm not sure if he's going to be around, but I think that there's a chance if people fall and, it's just a little bit different. But that's Jadarian Price from Notre Dame. I think, everyone's focused on their RB1 and Jeremiah Love, who's 100% going to be the first running back to go in this draft. Like, it's kind of like with Ashton Genty last year. It was like, yeah, we know he's one, like, and then it's after that. But I think that Price could fall a little bit because of that, and there are some other, and I won't name names because I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, but there's some other guys that could fall. But, we talked about Aaron Jones and just kind of what that build is like, and he reminds me a little bit of that. Size is the thing that, if you look at any of the scouting reports, has bumped him down a little bit, but there's so much good still. There's a lot of conversation too. He had an Achilles tear, summer workouts, freshman year 2022, but since then has been very healthy, hasn't had a ton of issues, worked his way back. What I really like about him that I think could make sense for the Packers is his vision. He follows the blocks extremely well. He has this patience that, if you watch any film on him, especially, like, I loved seeing the slow-mos when he'd have, a big run and break off. It looks like everything is moving so fast, and it's like, how the hell does he find this window? And if he sees just enough of it, boom, gone. And so I think that is huge, and that's what I always loved about Aaron Jones too, is sometimes it would look like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know how the Packers are going to get even just 5 yards. And somehow he'd find a block and he'd find a way. I think another thing that I like about him is his production after contact. He can get hit. He averages, I think it's about 4 yards after contact. And so that is big in the NFL as well, because you're going to get hit more than you did in college, and it's going to hurt. It's just, that's a known fact. I mean, at every position, but I feel like you hear time and time again from these rookie running backs, like, yeah, it's a different ballgame. Like, I'm getting hit hard constantly. And then I thought this statistic on him was really interesting. And, like, this is the kind of guy that, playing complementary to Josh Jacobs is like, yeah, that's where you just want the Packers to hit. Nearly 1 in 5 of his career carries went for 15 or more yards. And, like, that, to me, I'm like, yes, that's what they want. Like, if the Packers are struggling to maybe get some momentum, they're trying to establish the run a little bit, like, just give Josh Jacobs a breather, let this guy come in and let's get a first down and then move the chains and keep going. Like, that's the type of thing that I think that they need. That was the second best rate among this year's top running back prospects. So, and then the other thing that I like, too, is just his special teams ability. We know that, yes, we're here to talk about running backs, but we can't talk about the state of the Packers, period, without talking about just what a nightmare special teams is. And this is a guy that, because of that vision that I talked about a second ago, he could make, whether it's just for punt returns. Like, I think he's shifty enough to kind of see those things. And if you're sitting in the backup running back role for the Packers, then you don't feel like you're risking the guy as much when you put him on special teams, and he could maybe make a play. He has that big playability, mention the 15-yard plus stats. So really like it. I don't know if he's going to be there. I feel like he might. It just depends. But I think it could work to the Packers' advantage that he's RB2 and his RB in college, and his RB1 is getting a lot more of the attention. And then maybe it's like, wow, shoot, let's just get this guy and we can develop him over the next year. He can learn from Josh Jacobs and we could get something really special.
And I think another thing that'll help him is Mike Washington Jr.'s combine workout that he's been put on a lot of people's radar a little bit more. So that could help push price down. But I'm going to go the opposite way and say Jonah Coleman out of Washington. I think he's rated a little bit higher there. And Mafi finally gave me access to his database so I can kind of look at what he's got down here. But I really liked what I saw out of Coleman. And the reason I say the opposite way is because Coleman's listed 5'8", 220, whereas Price is 5'10", 203. So Coleman fits more the Marshawn Lloyd style build. I say short but stout, decent pass pro. He's got some shiftiness to him, a pretty good burst. And what I liked about him was he had good patience. The one thing that we always like with running backs is that they wait for the hole to open up for them. So, and he did that very well, but he also made a lot of his own plays. I liked what I saw from his speed. Mafi's got that is estimated 40 time as a 4.56, so that's more around the Aaron Jones type 40. So he's not going to be a true breakaway, flash, but he's still got enough that he's going to make plays with it. So I'm thinking he's going to sit there in round 2, so he's probably going to be close to what the Packers could choose. But like Sarah keeps saying, this is a kind of a top-heavy draft for running backs, and the rest are low. So this could be like the Richard Rodgers tight end year for the Packers, where all the top tight ends went out high, and then it was like a struggle to find somebody to fill a need. And, so some guys are going to go a lot higher than what they might have normally went in a different draft. But I think both Price and Coleman could be there at 52 if that's what the Packers decided they really needed at that point.
Yeah, and I think one point to Sarah's nomination of Price that's really a good thing is, and it's one of those ones that seems really undervalued by a lot of fans and even some draftniks, is that Price comes in having been a backup running back. And we saw, through the AJ Dillon, time with the Packers, where it was like his best production was generally when Jones was out and he was allowed to get the majority of snaps. And it's like there's a benefit to a guy like Price who's used to being a snap split guy, where it's like, I'm going to only get 10 to 15 snaps in the game, which means I'm going to get like 8 to 10 carries. And so he's not a guy that you're like, oh, he has to feel out the rhythm of a game kind of thing. It's like he's going to just play off of how the defense is like playing off of being geared up to stop Jacobs kind of thing. And it is a good skill to have, where it's like you have that mindset of like, I'm just going to hit the first crease I see kind of thing. I'm not going to like try to, find the perfect running gap or anything. It's like, hey, I'm just here to zag on the defense and, be that yin and yang complement to our starter. And I know that, we had just talked about how, like, yes, you would love to find a bell cow for moving forward, but at the same time, I do think hypothetically moving forward, if they could find a couple guys to split the snaps, they would prefer to do it that way instead of having to pay someone like in the high five figures to be their running back. But and I do think that's what part of Marshawn Lloyd's, he was partly there to be like a extreme change of pace differential from Jacobs, and partially to be like a this could be your future at the position kind of guy, and it just hasn't worked out because of all the injuries that we've already covered. But it'd be really interesting to see if they go for, we're just going to have like 2 to 3 guys to cover all the snaps as opposed to one guy getting 80% of the snaps at the position. And Coleman is another good one. Like you said, Joe, he is more in the Lloyd build, but, you do need to have some mass to hold up at the position in the NFL. Like Sarah said, you're going to get hit at times. You're going to get smoked in ways that you just never did in college because guys are just better at their jobs than the guys you played against in college. So, we'll have to see how that all plays out. But those are 2 really good names and guys that, for the average fan, you've seen play a lot the last few years because, just 3 years ago, I don't think Coleman played that much for the national runner-up Huskies team, but he was on that roster, and the last 2 years they were still getting a lot of the 2024 season. It was still like this is still the national runner-up from a year ago kind of thing, and then obviously with Price and Notre Dame, they've been in the playoff the past 2 seasons, so it's not hard to find film of those guys playing, and it's kind of easy to get a view on them. Anyone that your eye would twitch pretty heavily, Sarah, if the Packers took them day 2 in this draft?
I've been seeing a lot of just interesting takes and discourse around Roman Hemby from Indiana. And obviously, national champions, and I'm always the believer of, like, if a guy's a winner, a guy's a winner. Like, you can clearly see that. However, I just don't think that it's a fit for the Packers. Now, the Packers aren't usually the type of team to buy into hype. Like, they kind of walk to the beat of their own drum with a lot of things. So I'm not necessarily worried about it, but I have, started to see more people, should your team reach for Roman Hemby? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. Like, I don't think that needs to be done. Like, that would definitely make, to your question, my eye twitch a little bit if that was my team. And I think that he could have a really great career in the NFL, partly because he's probably going to go later, which means that he could end up in a better situation. But again, it just depends on the round and when he goes. But I think, elements that it makes sense for the Packers is his ability in the pass game. He's a really good pass catcher as a back, but lacks the size. He isn't the true workhorse back that we've kind of talked about. Like, hey, maybe that's what the Packers need. So that's one. Like, he's a guy that he'll get drafted. I'm sure he'll be fine as a backup. But I don't think the Packers need to reach for him on day 2 or whatever it may be.
Always 2 words a statement you love seeing in pre-draft articles is blank name player and the word reach in it. Joe, anyone that, I know we've, all 3 of us has said this is not a position we expect the Packers to take day 2, especially given that we have no round 1 pick. But is there a name that, like, if for whatever reason Groot takes a running back that you're like, oh God, no, like, why did we go that route? Is there anyone that is really on the no-fly list for you?
On day 2 specifically, this one might shock some people because I just mentioned his name, and that's Mike Washington. And the reason I'm going to say that is because from what I understand and from the circles that we kind of run in, he's got a little bit of fumbleitis. And if they can fix it and he can become that type of player like an Amon Green, then I could be okay with it. But that, I kind of think that's almost on par with Marshawn Lloyd not being healthy. is if you can't trust a guy to hang on to the ball when you need him the most. And think about it, how many times did we get frustrated with Aaron Jones when it seemed like in the biggest game, in the at the biggest moment, he friggin' fumbles the ball away. And so I don't know, it just, that would drive me nuts. Now, like I said, that's unless they think they can fix the fumbling issues. With like Amon Green, it was something as simple as they changed up his elbow pad. And if it was something as simple as that with Mike Washington, I would go for it. But I think that one would kind of, I would struggle to see the process with him, if that's how I can put it.
I completely agree on that point. The only thing I'll push is that Lloyd came out of college with a bit of a fumbleitis. Like, that was one of his listed cons.
So
So
I can't see if he fixed anything.
and I only bring it up to say, so we really don't know, like, what is the line of demarcation on that front. So fumbling, a good thing for Marshawn Lloyd, fumbling has not been his issue in the NFL so far. Moving on to day 3, in the range where we expect if they do take a back, they would be taking a back. Who are some names that, and Sarah, round doesn't really matter. If you want to put a round to it, that's awesome, but who are some names that in the day 3 range you're looking at as possible options for the Packers?
Well, I'm going to step in for a minute, because there's one name I'm specifically expecting Sarah to talk about. And if she doesn't, then we might have to end the episode early.
No, yeah, I told myself I'm not going to do it this year. So, listen, last year, and I did make a note not to forget to bring this up, so I'm actually really glad that you brought this up, Joe. Listen, I don't want to say I told you so last year, but I said wonderful, great things about RJ Harvey. And that I thought if he ended up in the right situation, that he could be a really good player in this league. And he had a phenomenal rookie season. I mean, I probably would have been in the Super Bowl if Bo Nix doesn't get hurt and they beat the Patriots in that game. But, 540 rushing yards, 146 carries, 7 rushing touchdowns, and then he had, I think, like 5 receiving touchdowns too. So I'm done. I've done my UCF fan service, so I'm not going to go there this year. But did have to give a shout out to RJ Harvey. But I'll let you go first, Joe, on who your guys that you're looking at maybe on day 3.
Okay, so with that being said, I do think I found a draft crush in the running back room, and that's Dean Connors out of Houston. The only thing that I need to see is, and I don't know if Houston's had their pro day yet, is I need to see his speed. Otherwise, on tape, it looks like his speed is good. He's a hard runner. He's good at pass pro. There were a couple of times that he had a linebacker running down on him that just kind of caught him off guard. But, being a running back, that will tend to happen. Good patience. He's a good receiver. He makes plays with the ball in his hand. Mike, I got to look it up real quick, but I believe he's a Hawaiian guy. So, that's got to be a plus for you. But I just really liked what I saw out of him. He gave you hints of maybe being a Josh Jacobs style runner, but I don't want to put him as a Josh Jacobs comp. I also had shades of Toby Gerhart come off of him, because there's a possibility that with his size and build, that one of the few teams that still uses a fullback could say, we're going to put him as a fullback and call it good. But I think if you used him as a regular running back, that he could be maybe not like a top 5 rusher and that, but he's definitely going to be a playmaker.
And you're right, he is from the Big Island, so yeah. Cool, very cool. Honestly, like, I've just I know that this is the position that we're going over this week, but I just haven't had, I'm going to be totally honest, I haven't had a chance to really check out running backs this offseason. It's one where I'm like, I have no idea how they're going to treat the position. So I say that now. I'm not going to BS anything. I'm going to let the two of you take the lead on this position group. Sarah, any other names that are on your draft crush list this season?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like crush is it's a strong word. But I think that someone that I could see kind of, thinking of, hey, it's day 3, or maybe it's later in day 2 and this guy's available and you could make it work and it just kind of seems like there's a lot of traits that align with the Packers and what they need, and that's Nicholas Singleton from Penn State. I think he's going to fall because he had that broken foot injury and is probably, he'd probably go higher if that wasn't the case. But, I'm not too concerned about a broken foot. Like, I feel like that's kind of like that's a more common injury and it's one that you can definitely come back from. So it's not like it's a ACL or an Achilles or something that's much more significant. And, he took a backseat. He was RB2 at Penn State. And kind of like what the point that Mike made before, like this is a guy that's used to playing RB2 or RB3, probably in the NFL. And like he's a guy that in a room is coming to just basically complement. And if he's available later, could serve as a complementary piece where you don't have to, give up a significant draft position to get him. I think he's also a guy that just has that like pure athleticism speed. He's a former track star, so I think just brings kind of life, kind of like Emmanuel Wilson did, where you can get a pop every now and then. Completely different back from Jacobs, but you come in and then you can give a little bit of a spark. And then again, he could be a special teams guy. He did contribute some on special teams, and we know that the Packers like to get that 2-for-1 value when they can. So just looking up the traits, it's like, hey, this guy probably has in the later rounds the traits that if he's available, the Packers could say like, hey, let's get this guy. He's on the board. So again, I don't know if he's my draft crush, but he's a practical choice for a life partner. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, and he does get a little bit overshadowed because of Katron Allen. Allen gets a little bit more of the love. Again, friend of show Jake Shavink and JJ Leahy both kind of, when they're doing their mock draft episodes and Allen's name pops up, they instantly, do we go ahead and just take him now or take him later? But Penn State has done a pretty good job of producing running backs in the last few years. So, that would be, but of course, it's Big Ten. And, Big Ten, the thing about Big Ten are they're all blue collar type players. They're going to go out there and give you the 110% all the time. And they're lunch pails. They're going to bring their lunch to work and all that stuff. So, but another one that I kind of want to throw this name out here. Well, first, since Sarah won't talk about him, I'm going to go ahead and talk about him. I did like Miles Montgomery out of UCF. He really didn't have the top end speed, but he did have significant enough speed that, it's not like, oh God, what was the one running back that was on the Packers? He came in on a UDFA and he was timed 4.7 speed, and he literally looked it on film, and he didn't last long in training camp. But anyway, this is to say that Montgomery's got enough speed that he should be able to stick on somewhere. I did say his pass pro was a little bit iffy. He did get eaten up a little bit. Decent burst. His vision looked good. He seemed to be able to follow the blocking when need be. I didn't really get to see him do much in the pass game, so I can't tell you what he was able to do that way, but he did look pretty good as maybe a later round type guy. Another guy that I really like, but he's an old, is Chip Trainum from Toledo. He's got good speed, good size. He did struggle a little bit in pass pro, was pretty good in pass catching, but I thought he was a little too hesitant. There's a difference between being too hesitant and being patient. and Chip did go over the end of being too hesitant. So that's a drawback. But like I also said, he's an old. He's 24. I think he'll be 25 in season. So that's going to be a struggle for him. I'm trying to look through the one that I keep going back to that I'm not sure how he's going to end up is the running back out of Army, Noah Short. He's very athletic, but the big question is he going to be a running back or is he going to be a wide receiver? Either or. He can be either or. He's 6 foot, like 210 or something like that. So he's got a shot. And then Navy runs the triple option where they really don't, they could be listed as a running back, but they use him more as a wide receiver, or he could be listed as a wide receiver and be used more as a running back. But, I think he could be something special and maybe be something on special teams also. So that's the one that I have a big question mark behind, because I'd love to see him as how some of these guys are brought on to college teams as they're just listed as athlete. I think you could do the same thing in the pros with Noah Short, but then it's once he gets in there and starts working, what are they going to do with him?
Anyone that you've kind of crossed off your board for whatever reason this draft process?
Yes, because Mafi told me to. No, I guess the kid out of Kentucky, Seth McGowan, has some off-the-field concerns, so I kind of took him off my... I didn't pry into what the off-the-field concerns were, so I don't know what they are, but I'm assuming it's some kind of arrest, and just to kind of save the Packers a little bit of a headache, I kind of said, nah.
Yeah, you took my answer actually, and he came off my board because the Packers seem for the most part to avoid that, especially in draft picks. They're usually not the type that are willing to even entertain it. So I kind of looked at it like I'm assuming he's coming off the Packers board, so he's gonna come off mine too.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a position where like I said, at some point that
the one thing I gotta say before.
Go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say the one thing that I'm surprised is there are no Iowa and no Michigan guys coming out this year at this position.
Well, Michigan, it's because they're totally blanking. The one that everyone was thinking would be a day 1 or day 2 pick, he broke his foot and then transferred out to go. It was the guy who came from Bama, and I'm totally blanking on his name right now. And I think he went to somewhere down in SEC country, I think. And then Jordan Marshall is a true sophomore, so he's still got to stay in school. And yeah, everyone else who got snaps this season is like a true freshman, true sophomore kind of thing. So we just don't have anyone that's eligible this year. How about for Iowa? What is Iowa? Yeah, Iowa not having a running back is really strange. What is their situation on that front?
I think it's the same thing. They were all youngins. I think a couple of them transferred out, and the rest of, I mean, I think it depends on what you want to classify Caden Weegan as. Is he going to be a wide receiver at 5'8" in the league, or is he going to be a running back? But I know Jazzy and Patterson transferred out. I know one came back, and then the rest of them were all sophomore freshmen. So yeah, they're all youngins, not eligible yet. But before we close it out, we did get one question thrown at us. Well, technically 2, but it's under one thing. This is from Goose_MM on Twitter. If you could bring any Packers running back from 1990 to 2010 and put them on the roster, who would it be and why? And then the second question is, do you think the Packers need a fullback on the roster?
Ooh, Sarah, go.
I mean, I think for me, it's probably Amon Green. It's a fan favorite pick, but just thinking of him with Josh Jacobs, I mean, I love that. Just what the possibilities there. Again, this is complete fan fiction, but I love that. I love turning on the Green Bay Packers on a Sunday afternoon and seeing those two in the backfield. And those guys just loved being a Packers player too. So think he, just brings the star power in addition to what Josh Jacobs provides. And as far as fullback, I don't think that the Packers need one, but it is always fun and interesting when they do have one. So sure, why the hell not?
So, Amon's such a good one, and he definitely gets upvotes for the. I wish they had somehow brought him back for the 2010 team. It was already like, oh my god, when they brought him back for 2009, and he got to, I think, set the record for like most rushing yards as a Packers running back or whatever it was. So it was just like, oh man, like if out of all the guys on the 2000s teams who like didn't get to be on the 2010 team but deserved to be on it, Amon was definitely high on that list. But to Zag, I'll just go with Dorsey just to give them like a big back who could affect the passing game as well. And then as far as the fullback, I'll say yeah. Like I think LaFleur's offense, I don't, like Sarah said, I don't think it necessarily needs one, but he needs a guy who can affect blocking angles, and they haven't found a second tight end they really like. So for that reason alone, it's like, yeah, it would be nice to have a fullback who could, and it did seem for the first 2 to 3, like they signed what's his face, Dusty's cheese wheel guy, Dan, the Northwestern superback, Dan Vitale. They drafted DeGuara, and it just seemed like they were trying to find one for the longest time under LaFleur. So, like Sarah said, they've had success without one, but I do wonder if LaFleur wants one, kind of thing, because it like I said, it seemed like for 2/3 of his time as the head coach, he's been trying to find one. So we'll see how it goes from here out.
I'm gonna go with that one just to bounce off you guys. Yeah, I do agree. I think LaFleur wants one. He just hasn't been able to get it yet. So I don't think it's going to be an actual fullback that he brings in. It's going to be a tight end that is going to be more your H-back type tight end that, I think they kind of hope that they could do something with Musgraves in that sense, because he's a bit of that size and athletic profile for it. But that didn't happen. I think they wanted Josh Wiley, and that's still up in the air. And I think they wanted John Fitzpatrick in that role a little bit, and again, that's a little bit up in the air. So I would have to put it that way: is they may not list the guy as a true fullback, but I do think that they're going to bring in a tight end that is going to be that H-back type player. Now, as for the running back, obviously my guy would be Amon, but since Sarah already took that low-hanging fruit on it. Dorsey, I loved Dorsey growing up, so that one I could agree with too. I've been sitting here trying to think, because this is where I'd have to put caveats on it. If I could get 2013 Rookie of the Year Eddie Lacy and have him stay that way his whole career, I would take that every day of the week, even if we didn't have Josh Jacobs, because that is, he was a thumper. He had good enough speed, could catch out of the backfield. If we could have that, but if he's going to follow the same career trajectory, then I don't want that. Amon, if we could have his career from the day he got to Green Bay on, I'd go for it all the way. So if I could use we get prime Eddie Lacy and have the prime Eddie Lacy for his career, I would go with that. If not, I think I would like to throw Ryan Grant's name in there. Just because Ryan Grant, I think he could be a good complement to what Josh Jacobs is, because Jacobs is more of your downhill runner, whereas Grant was more of your one cut, type runner. So there was a little bit of difference to him, but I think Grant had a little bit more speed. But beings that Sarah already took Amon and Mike already took Dorsey, I just to be a little bit different, I would have to go with Ryan Grant.
All right. Now we have all dropped at some point this episode.
No, I'm good. I just had to get up and grab something real quick, so I just
Awesome,
turned my screen
awesome.
off. Yep.
All right, but
I think I'm going to blame Sarah, because it seems like every time we try to have Sarah on, there's always some kind of technical difficulties.
Hey, maybe that's why we just have to keep it to once a year, because then you guys just wouldn't have a podcast if I messed it up every time.
we can put whatever label we want on it. But Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today. Oh, there goes Joe again.
Oh, right on cue.
Thanks so much for joining us again, Sarah. Where can everyone find all your work that you do covering the Packers?
Yeah, thank you guys. It's always a pleasure, and glad, Mike, you were able to rejoin again. I know sometimes hit or miss if we get to do it, the three of us, so it's always, the more the merrier. But, you can follow me on Twitter at Sarah Kelleher4 right now, just doing the podcast, not doing any writing anymore. I write for my job, so it's just a lot of writing, so podcast every Wednesday on the Pack-A-Day podcast. And there goes Mike. Everyone just, okay, you're back. No, you're back. But at Sarah Kelleher4 on Twitter, and then at Pack-A-Day podcast every week on Wednesday with Dusty Evely and Steve Perhatch. And yeah, I'll be taking a little break for the draft soon, but looking forward to then jumping back in the off season again and then covering them for another season.
Awesome stuff all the time, Sarah. Thank you very much. And as she mentioned, her Pack-A-Day episode, check it out on Tuesdays. She, Steve, and Dusty always put out any questions, ask us anything, and they do try their best to catch all the questions that are sent in. They'll kind of lump together similar ones and stuff. But, and little tidbit, if you want your question answered, add a little foodie thing on the end of it, because that always catches their eye.
There you go. You know the game.
I have to ask before we finish. Dusty will put those question things out once in a while, and I'll give him some of the most random, goofy-ass questions. Does he actually bring those up to you guys on there, or does he just kind of throw them off?
We do read every question, and then we laugh about some, and then we move on. So I know which ones you're talking about, and I will say just keep sending them because it's a good laugh. It's a good time.
And I will say, Joe, that you can tell the times that the weeks are thin on questions, because I have definitely... And what's always funny is Dusty, without fault, will lead with yours if it's a thin week, because it's like, from Iowa Joe, it's always the first or second one. Whenever he's like, the barrel is low, I guess you gotta go with Joe's question.
I don't get to listen to a lot of podcasts because of my work, so I don't get to catch it when C asks them, and I always fail to go back, and it's like, I love throwing these weird ones out to Dusty just to see what he does, but so I've never gotten to catch if you guys actually use them or not, but I love throwing those most random weird things out there.
But no, their episode is always one of the most fun ones of the week. Between answering all the fun questions that people like Joe and I send in, or when Sarah and Steve go, "That's a Dusty question, Dusty, go!" And it's always a fun time listening to the three of them go off. As Sarah goes and moves about her house again, we'll just take care of some housekeeping on our end. Check us out at our social medias, at Ohana_Packer on Twitter, at Ohana Packers Edition on Instagram. Please follow us on Facebook, as we keep saying, we are trying to get 100 followers at minimum so that we can live stream there. The big one coming up will be our day 2 of the draft. We have to, when Sarah gets back from doing her own housekeeping, we will be sure to invite her to our day 2 live draft coverage. What's it called? Once we get to 100 followers, we will be doing our drawing to the Facebook followers, the signed memorabilia, and the goodies that I sent over from Honolulu. Don't worry, they will still be good. They were good through 2026, so as long as you guys finish following, otherwise Joe will have to sad eat all of the macadamia nuts that I sent him So please keep Joe from possibly making poor health choices and eating too many chocolate-covered macadamia nuts on his own. They are a little healthier. They are dark chocolate, but that's still not good to go through 5 boxes of Aloha Max on your own. But Sarah, as I said, while you were doing some housekeeping on your end while we did ours, you are, of course, again, welcome to join us on our Day 2 live coverage. Joe will send you the link. I know that, like you said, you take a little bit of a break during draft season, but if you find yourself yearning for some Packers coverage, please join us on our live stream. We just bring people on. We are... We're always trying to bribe Dusty into joining us for, 15, 30 minutes to get his insight, which is always, I think I saw that guy play this year, but it's always a fun time. or it always devolves into, did Kentucky play them? No, don't know anything about him. So we'd love to have you on, and we can have similar thoughts with, did UCF play this team? But we just want to say again, Sarah, thank you for our once a year episode with you. We always appreciate you coming on, taking time out of your schedule to join us. Again, follow her at Sarah Kelleher 4 on Twitter. Check her out on Pack-A-Day with Dusty and Steve. And I've done our outro, so once again, go Pack Go and aloha!
Packers fans out here to stay. Cheeseheads green and gold all day. Jordan Love lead us to the bay. Every game we find a way. Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for all, let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for all, green and gold gonna glow. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown.